Boker Tov, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Okay, at 6 o'clock, it's time to get started. Um, this is shiur number 4 in the series on the sons of Rachel. And I was hafuch al hafuch. I did things backwards. We started with Menashe and then moved to Ephraim. And now we are moving to the heavy hitter, their father, Yosef. Now, Yosef is a daunting figure. I think for me, probably the hardest of the tribes to pin down, to really understand, because his name is ever expanding. And there are certain personalities, let's say, that might tend more towards Yehuda, the other massive tribe within the satellite of the Bnei Yisrael, and some that tend more towards Yosef. These two stand at odds, Yehuda Ephraim or Yehuda Yosef. And so, as I've mentioned numerous times over the course of this series, I've always kind of stood on Team Leah, Team Yehuda, easier for me to understand. It matches my personality, my background, my upbringing. Yosef was definitely harder for me. But I've spent a number of years thinking about Yosef and his sons, and trying to delve more into understanding his concept. And I hope that in today's shiur, which will most likely spill over into next week's shiur, notice that after today there are two more shiurim in this mini series, and we wrap up the Shvatim. Binyamin will definitely be the last shiur, or it might be the second half of next week's shiur into the last shiur. But I don't know that we will finish with Yosef, the ever adding, the ever expanding tribe, today. So you'll bear with me if we have to extend our talk together on Yosef into two shiurim. As always, if you have any questions, please write them in the comments, or just note them, and I will take questions at the end. And please do mute yourselves. Okay, so just as with last week, I was trying to use the lens of a place, of Shiloh, to try and understand Ephraim, Shiloh being the main city of Ephraim. Today, I will try to use Shechem, Nablus, the city of Yosef, to as a means, as a lens to try and understand Yosef. There are many shiurim that are possible on this particular tribe, Yosef, this son of Jacob. He's massive. He takes up a massive amount of text within Breshit, and so there have been books written on Yosef, and so my way of looking at the tribes is very often through place, and so we'll shortly get to the place of Yosef, the city of Yosef, Shechem, and through our study of Shechem, I hope to understand Yosef a bit better. Okay, before we do that though, I do want to do a little bit on the son of Yaakov himself. Although obviously this is going to be short shrift because there's just too much about the personality of Yosef. But as with all of the tribes, with the exception of Menashe and Ephraim, whose birth story we don't know too much about, and whose mother, Osnat, we don't know too much about. If we go back to the first shiurim of the series about the sons of Leah and the liminal sons, the sons born to the maidservants, Bilhah and Zilpah, we always discuss the birth situation, the concept of the conception of the child. And we know that Rachel was barren. She forced two children into existence through her maidservant Bilhah, was Dan and Naphtali. And there comes a time when God will remember Rachel, heeds her, opens her womb once again, and makes her fertile. And she conceives and bears a child. And she says, Vatomer, Asaf Elokim et cherpati. This child, after many years of painful infertility, marks a child of my own, a lightening of this burden that I have had to bear. It's a completion in a way of who I am. God has taken away, he has gathered in, he has gathered and absorbed away from me my shame, my disgrace, that burden which I have borne um, for so long in not being able to bear a child. And off of this idea of Asaph, she plays on that name of gathering in and names this child Yosef. Because Asaph can mean an end, but it can also mean a continuation. Vatikrat Shemo Yosef. She calls his name Yosef. This is not a child that marks an end. This is a child that marks a beginning for Am Yisrael, something which will start a process. Yosef Hashem li ben acher. God will add another son for me. That this is the beginning of this new contribution that I can make to the family of Jacob. But aside from that contribution I made in my past by bringing Bilhah into the family dynamic, now I myself am going to bear not only this one, Yosef, but another one. And it is with the birth of Yosef that Yaakov feels a certain Yaakov himself, not only Rachel, feels a relief. He feels that a chapter has been closed and it is time for him to move on in his life. As soon as Rachel bears Yosef, Yaakov says to Lavan, "It is time for me to return to my ancestral house. I have, this marks a turning point for me. Things are right in my world the way that they hadn't been right before." You oftentimes in the pain of the woman's infertility, we forget about her loving husband and the pain that he feels as well, even if he might have children through other wives. But seeing his love suffer so, and then seeing the alleviation of that suffering definitely changes him. We see this with Elkanah and Hannah and the great pain he felt on her behalf. We see this here with Yaakov, who says, "Okay, now something which had been in doubt is now resolved. You two are bearing children from your womb for this family." And his love for Rachel is only ever paralleled in his love for the son that she bears for him, for Yosef. In other words, there's only two places in the Torah that speak of Yaakov loving someone, and that is his love for Rachel and his love for Yosef. And that Yosef is naturally cherished by Yaakov in the way that Rachel is as well, because in a sense, it's instinctive, it's reactive, in the same way that Yaakov reacts upon with great emotion the first time that he sees Rachel, and breaks down crying. It's overwhelming in a way, Yaakov's reaction, and we see the same tone of a reaction when it comes to his favoritism and his love for Yosef, for Rachel's son. And Chazal say that this is in the main due to the likeness between Yosef and Rachel. That Yaakov's love for Yosef was an outgrowth of his love for Rachel. They're described in parallel. Rachel is one who is described as Yifat Toar v'Yifat Mareh. She was one who is beautiful of appearance, and Yosef, her son, is described in that same vein. Vayhi Yosef Yifei Toar v'Yifei Mareh. The same exact language. This parallel is speaking of this great beauty, but beauty not in the sense of definitely in the sense of a physical attribute, but we all know beauty is in the eyes of a beholder, right? And clearly Yaakov was taken with Rachel's particular brand of beauty, but it was a beauty that almost, it seems from this language, Yifat Toar v'Yifat Mareh, seems to be of mysterious bent beyond what was the standard of physical beauty at that time. And so it seems, I put it this way, The beauty seemed the embodiment of passion, longing, instinct, response. It demanded utter engagement. It was something that almost gripped him and he and consumed him, and definitely developed something within him that hadn't been present and wasn't present with Leah, but hadn't been present prior. And when I can't belabor Yosef too much at this point. There's just way too much to say. But when we get to his bracha that Yaakov gives to him, it's a long bracha, but I'm only hitting on this one verse of the blessing that he gives Yosef on his deathbed. And this is, of course, after he had already blessed Yosef's two sons with inheriting their father's legacy and their father's destiny, tribal destiny at least. Yosef is both a tribe and also a patriarch. He's kind of bridging. He's an Abba and a Ben. He bridges both. Just think of like the Kabbalistic concept of the Ushpizin, where we have Yosef standing there among Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and then Yosef. And so in his blessing to Yosef, Ben Porat Yosef, you hear Ephraim there, right? Ephraim, who of course is going to take the dominant elements that so distinguish Yosef, and much more than Menashe will take them. The elements of the beauty, of the fecundity, of the production, of the chen, which we'll get to in just one second. That word chen, Ben Porat Yosef. Yosef. Here I'm translating as Rashi translates. There are a lot of ways to translate this peculiar verse. But I translated here. I changed the translation from the Sfariaz standard translation to Rashi's translation. Yosef is a charming one. Ben Porat ben Chen. He is like I have a daughter named Bat Chen, right? Which is it's not the daughter of someone who's Chen or the daughter of someone named Chen, the embodiment of chen, right? Ben chen, the embodiment of grace. In this case, ben chen, literally the embodiment of she who matzah chen be'enei Yaakov, of Rachel, who found favor, grace in her husband's eyes. Ben Porat Yosef, a charming one who is full of chen. Ben Porat alei ayin, a graceful, charming, chen-filled one for those who take him in with their eyes. Banot Saada Ale Shor. I like this word that I chose, clamor. The girls clamor on the walls to see him. It's like, I don't know, whoever the like Backstreet Boys du jour of the, or whoever's the heartthrob, right, of the day. There's something like about that male beauty that he embodies, and all the girls had crushes on him. Banot Sada Leishor. They're speaking about something very youthful. He's always called the Na'ar Yosef, and he retains that Na'arut, that youthful beauty in I guess my imagination. And I am definitely and I take my cue here from Chazal, who dwell a lot on his chen. I just look at how Rashi is like, Benot Mitzrayim hayut soatot le'sakel biyofio. They would just like crawl all over each other to see his beauty. And there's so many midrashim about how they would just like they would line up for tickets to get into Potiphar's house, so that they could get a glimpse of Yosef. And when he would pass and they were all like, busying themselves with cutting their fruit, they would be so distracted by his beauty that they would cut right through the fruit and injure their hands. So many midrashim of that same motif of their and how enamored they were and smitten they were with Yosef. And this is the cues for this midrash are not only Yifei Torah v'Yifei Marad, that he was so beautiful, but over and over, Yosef chen be'enav, he found Yosef is finding chen in Potiphar's eyes. Ma'yiten chino be'enei sar beit hasoar, when he was thrown into prison, he found chen in the eyes of his jailers. And then in this case, it's not that Yosef is finding chen, it's just in the context of Yosef. We see that in this case it is the the brothers of Yosef, who said, "Vayomru hecha yitanu nimtzachen b'nei Adoni." You have saved us. We are grateful, and we will be servants to Paro. Um, okay, so no, the Egyptians. I'm sorry, not the brothers of Yosef here, but the Egyptians also respond. Yosef, in a way, draws them to him, and they respond by wanting to find favor in Paro's eyes. I would like to talk just for 1 second about this word chen. And I write it thus because it's such a difficult word. I say it's an untranslatable word, right? When you say, "Oh, he's so full of chen," right? He's so like, such a zis. Like there, it's hard to really understand what the word chen means. But I tried. An untranslatable word containing elements of beauty, grace, charm, charisma, innocence, and openness combined in a single concept. And this was the hallmark of Yosef. Chen means an openness to relationship, the channel for interaction with and appreciation of the broader world. And the chen of Yosef drew the world to him. He is over and over again described as one who naturally awakens within others a desire to be close to him, to draw from him, to engage with him, and he in turn faithfully engages with the world around him. In that Yosef, while he embodies the charismatic, right? The one who you just can't help but be drawn to. Sometimes you go into like a crowded room and like that there's like just a person there who just by dint of their sheer charisma, and it's not necessarily only built around their personality, it's just it's inherent to who they are, draws people to them. And that very much is Yosef. But such a person can generally be manipulative, cynical, can use his chen or her chen for his own ego or his own purposes. Yosef is called Yosef HaTzadik. He was one who never took advantage of his chen, but used his chen to try and supply the world with their food and their needs, and succeeded in doing so. And when put to a test, because of his beauty, was trustworthy and faithful. And as we spoke about, as we were discussing last week with Ephraim, mastered his eyes. And that's why he was granted the Kol Haroeh. The Ephraim was given this special city of Shiloh, which celebrates everything the eye can take in. So Yosef masters his yetzer, his any kind of will that he might have to sin, and he withstands the temptations of Eshet Potiphar. Here I'm just paraphrasing this well-known story, which you have here in both Hebrew and English. How could I possibly do such a thing? His trustworthiness proves to us how the tzaddik, no matter how charismatic and how beautiful and how mysterious and how alluring, can successfully interact with the world around him and maintain his integrity. That is the hallmark of Yosef, his chen and his integrity in a masterful and successful enmeshing. So with that brief introduction to Yosef, and I know I didn't do him justice at all, but those are just the concepts that I wanted to throw out before we get into a discussion of his city of Shechem. I'll just frame Shechem before we get into it too deeply into it, with remembering that as I discussed with Ephraim, because Ephraim again captures this most the mystery and the chen and the allure and the charisma of Yosef and the charm of Yosef, most in a most undistilled fashion. This is a wonderful trait. It's an endearing trait. Haben yakir li Ephraim, right? Hamu me'ai lo. You can't stop thinking about the person you have a crush on. right? Or the person you love, and your brain can't quit him, but it's also very dangerous. And we discussed this as well in the concept of hine bal hachalomot magia, right? The purveyor of dreams, the master of dreams is coming. Um, one who will bring us all to idolatry. And so this charisma is a very positive trait, but it also can be a very damaging and dangerous trait. And with that, we'll look at the city of Shechem, the city that probably more so than any other city in Israel, in Eretz Israel, with perhaps the exception of Yerushalayim, is a city of unmatched potential in both directions, for good and for bad. And there is so much that happens in the city of Shechem in the biblical record. And we're not going to, this is not a shiur on Shechem. This is a shiur on Yosef. So there is much that I would love to say about the city of Shechem, but I'm not going to be belaboring the history of Shechem too much. I will try and limit myself to the extent that I can with how Shechem embodies Yosef, the personality of Yosef. So first of all, where am I getting this from? Where am I getting the idea that Shechem is a city of Yosef? Not only with my map, which I'm sorry I didn't bring for you here, where I can see that Shechem sits right on the border of Menashe and Ephraim. So it is squarely as a city can be in the territories of the sons of Yosef. But why specifically Shechem? There are other cities in Ephraim, there are other cities in Menashe. Why is Shechem considered the flagship city of Yosef? So this is in great part due to these verses that cap off the book of Genesis, where Yaakov is blessing his son Yosef. This is before the blessing that he will give to all of his sons on his deathbed. And he says to Yosef, Yisrael says to Yosef, "Hinei anochi met, I am not long for this world. Va'yalohim imachem v'heshiv etchem el eretz avotechem." We are now all in Egypt, but eventually we will return from this exile back to the land that is the land of your ancestors. That is the land of me, Yaakov, and the land of my father, Yitzchak, and the land of my grandfather, Abraham. V'ani natati lecha Shechem echad al achecha. And I am giving you one Shechem over and against your brothers. Asher lakachti miyad ha'emori b'charbi u'bikashti. That I claimed, that I took from the Emori, from the Amorites, with my sword and bow. And this is a strange expression. I am giving you an extra or an additional Shechem. And so really the simplest way to understand what Shechem means here is, I believe Rashi brings the pshat first. I'm not 100% sure on that, but Rashi, I believe, would translate this as, I am giving you one portion more. Shechem echad. Shechem is the part of the body that lies in, especially on an animal, in between the shoulders. This I don't remember what it's called, but it's a part that unites the whole of the torso. That's the physical part of the body. That's the word Shechem. And so I am giving you one part over and against your brothers. The simplest meaning here is that you're going to get a double portion. So you're essentially, Yosef, going to inherit the firstborn's double inheritance. It's not going to go to the firstborn of Leah. It's going to go to the firstborn of Rachel. So you're going to get an extra portion. And this translates into the two nachalot, the two territorial allotments given to the sons of Yosef, given to Menashe and Ephraim. So he did indeed get a double portion in terms of the inheritance within Eretz Yisrael. And and his presence within the tribes, within the constellation of tribes, Yosef is presented dually, both as Menashe and as Ephraim. This is one of the opinions of the Midrash, which we'll get to. We'll get to that. Let me see if I can. Here, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia. Here I'm Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Nechemia Amar, Ani natati lecha Shechem echad. That's not the one I wanted to show you. Where is it? Oh, okay. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, here. Rabbi Yehuda for Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, Bani natati lecha Shechem, zoa bechora. I'm giving you a portion. I'm giving you the bechora, right? I'm giving you the levusho shel Adam harishon, the garment of Adam, the first man, meaning like the great majesty of Israel is going to be channeled through you. You are going to be the Bechor of Israel. You're getting the double portion. And Asher lakachti miyad Amori, I took this Bechor myself from my brother Esav, and then without, I don't want to belabor this point here, that the Midrash is going to go into, Esav wasn't really an Amori, but he acted like a Gentile Amori. But that's one way to understand, and I think the simplest way to understand this verse. Yosef, you're getting a double portion. However, the three other explanations brought in this midrash are that Yosef, you are getting the city of Shechem. V'anini natati lecha ben shehishkim v'lo asita k'ma'aseyan lefichach tehei hashkem bechelkecha. My son, you, Yosef, who acted differently than your brothers, Yaakov is saying to Yosef, you will get tehei hashchem bechelkecha. Shechem will be in your portion, right? Or you'll get an extra portion. Here, this first explanation isn't so clear as to whether it means extra or specifically the city of Shechem. But I believe that the simplest way to understand this verse, this midrash is Teya Shechem b'chalkecha. Shechem will be in your portion. This is reinforced by Rabbi Pinchas, who says we are actually talking about the city of Shechem. It's important that the city of Shechem be in Yosef's portion. B'Shechem nifritza ha'erva. In Shechem, the licentiousness burst forth. This is one of the foundational stories of Shechem, which we haven't. I haven't done a survey for you, but by this point, Israel has had quite a bit, the family of Israel, the family of Yaakov has had quite a bit of interaction with Shechem. Remember the story of Dinah going out to engage with the daughters of Shechem, the girls of Shechem, and she is raped by Shechem, the prince, the eponymous prince of his city. And so that's the erva, that's this licentious sexual behavior that Rabbi Pinchas is talking about, the gadarta ota. But you, Yosef, were one who controlled sexual licentiousness. You didn't go down that bad path with the wife of Potiphar. Lefichach tehei bechelkecha. And that's why the city that erupted in sexual misconduct should be in your tribal allotment, because you know how to control those urges. So here Rabbi Pinchas is saying we're talking about the city. And then we looked at briefly at this machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Yehuda says we're talking about an extra portion. You're going to get an extra portion. But then Rabbi Nechemia says zo Shechem vadai. Rabbi Nechemia Amar Bani natati lecha Shechem echad. I'm giving you Shechem. Asher lakachti miyad ha'amori is a chamor avi Shechem. I conquered Shechem, or more correctly, my sons Shimon and Levi conquered Shechem. I took it from the Amori, from Hamor, the king of Shechem, and this is going to you. So these verses here, and the midrash, or the bulk of midrashic explanation of these verses, seem to indicate that the city of Shechem belongs to Yosef, and it's important for Yosef to claim specifically this city. So we already start to see this inherent and integral connection between the personality of Yosef and this city that will fall in his ancestral allotment, and will specifically be his flagship city. this will play out when his bones are returned uh, from Egypt and are reinterred in a grave in the land of Canaan, which will become the land of Israel. When Moshe brings Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, he takes with him the bones of Yosef, and the bones of Yosef travel with Am Yisrael through their wilderness experience for 40 years. And then here at the very end of the book of Joshua, we see that they reach their final resting place. Where? In his city, in Shechem. ואת עצמות יוסף אשר העלו בני ישראל ממצרים קברו בשכם, בחלקת השדה אשר קנה יעקב מאת בני חמור אבי שכם במי הקציתה, והיו לבני יוסף לנחלה. So this is a concrete statement of the promise that Yaakov had made and hinted to, I believe, to Yosef, that Ani natati lecha Shechem echad. There's something about this city, Yosef, that's going to be yours for eternity. And we need you to be interred there. It's the right thing for you to be there, not in Ma'arat HaMachpelah, not in the cave of the patriarchs in Hebron, not in Yerushalayim, but you have to specifically be in Shechem. There's a reason why you belong in Shechem. And that is going to be a great deal of this shiur, is asking how is Shechem how is Shechem related to Yosef conceptually, not just here clearly that he was buried in Shechem. We're going to move a little bit more deeply into Yosef and his connection to Shechem through this midrash in Sota. Kavru b'Shechem. He was buried in Shechem. Now, up until now, I could say he was buried in Shechem because Yaakov had told him that he has a specific relationship with the city of Shechem. But there's something deeper. And the depth of Shechem is related to Yosef's lived experience. When Yosef heard that his father had given him a Shechem echad al achecha, it brings him right back, it must bring him right back to the scene of the crime, because he himself had been in Shechem. If you recall, Shechem is the place from where he was sold. Kavru b'Shechem. They buried him in Shechem. Ma'ishna b'Shechem. Why Shechem? Why not Hebron? Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Mishchem ginavuhu. He was stolen away from Shechem. U'l'Shechem nachzir avedato. So you have to do hashavat aveda. You have to return the stolen object back to where it was taken from. Let's look at our story of the sale of Yosef. The brothers went to shepherd their sheep, the sheep of their father in Shechem. By the way, passing familiarity with the land of Israel immediately raises eyebrows and lots of red flags, because there is no reason why the sons of Jacob should travel upwards of a 3 days journey on the road with all of their father's sheep from Hebron all the way down south to Shechem, which is quite far north, right? It makes no sense from a topographical standpoint, from a logistical standpoint. It's not like the mir'eh, it's not like the grazing grounds around Shechem are superior to the grazing grounds of Midbar Yehuda. That's fantastic place to graze your sheep around Hebron and around Beit Lechem area, just slightly north of Hebron. So it really makes no sense, which is gonna, obviously cue Chazal that something's going on here in the psyche of the brothers, and Yaakov's sense is obviously something's off. Vayomer Yisrael al Yosef, halo achecha roim b'Shechem. Your brothers have gone to like Topeka, right? To I mean, and you're in Manhattan. I mean, I don't know. There's a difference there between Kansas and right. It's far away. To graze their sheep. L'cha v'ashachacha alehem. go and meet up with them. Something you have to have an intervention. You have to meet with them. And he says, Hineni, I shall do that. And check out. I'm ready to do it. He says, go vayomer lo lechna re'eh et shlom achecha v'et shlom hatzon v'hashiveni dabar v'yishachel me'emek Chevron v'yavosh chema. And he leaves the valley, the valley of Chevron, which of course is a mountain. And so the word valley tips off the sages that he's leaving what is deeply interred in the land of Hebron, the promise of the patriarchs of the future of Am Yisrael, which will involve an exile out of Eretz Yisrael. This is the start of the exile. His sale by his brothers is the beginning of the exile, and so he's leaving from that deep wisdom. The Midrash says, Me'emek Chevron, and he goes all the way up to Shechem, and they see him coming, and he finds a man, and he says, what are you looking for? And he says, I am looking for my brothers. Et achai anochi mevakesh. Very loaded language. Where are they grazing? Now he directs them then to Dotan, but Chazal are going to say that the sale, even though it is true that they are adjacent to Shechem, they're in Dotan, they went up to Shechem. And they're going to Shechem means that the site of the sale of Yosef is assigned to Shechem in the rabbinic imagination. Mishchem ganvuhu, he was stolen away from Shechem, and so that's where he has to be returned. And when the brothers go up to Shechem, which I mentioned is very, very odd that they should take such a huge journey for this task of grazing their sheep. Lirot et son, to graze their sheep. Nakud al et. You see here the dots on top of the et? Rashi is saying our Masoretic tradition wants us to see like a flashing yellow sign here, right? Something is off. Lirot et son, right? There's something with that. The Masoretic tradition retains the nikudot to cue us into something. Shlo ela lirot et atzman. They were only going up there to coddle themselves, to feed themselves in this translation, but to stroke their own egos, to revisit the site of their triumph, right? To say great things. We did great things here. Shimon, Levi, the rest of us, we vanquished our sister's rapist and his city up here. We're going back to our old triumphant stomping grounds to figure out who we are as Zvulun, who I am as Asher, because I'm not able to do so within the context of my father's home, where Yosef is always front and center with his Getonet Pasim, with his coat of many colors, his sign of the favoritism of his father, and Rashi will take this, always getting his cues from Chazal, expand this within the storyline. Nas'umizeh, when the gentleman who Yosef meets says that your brothers have traveled on. They've gone on to Dotan. I don't have the verse here, but that's the continuation of the story. Hisiu atzman min ha'achva. Not only did they physically travel, understand that their emotional state is not one of fraternity. That when they see you coming, they will plot to kill you. They are not looking for rapprochement. They're not looking for some kinds of a tikkun. They have tried to run away from you and escape from you, and you are not letting them. It's almost a warning that he's giving to Yosef. So this journey to Shechem, and Shechem specifically, is a place that is inviting fratricide. It's inviting the opposite of achva, of brotherly camaraderie and love. Now, one can say that already this is a place of broken brit. If I define brit as covenant, covenant means a relationship, an agreement, right? You make a brit. You could be a brit shalom. You can have a peace agreement, or you can, have some kind of a binding with another nation or another family through a brit. And recall that with the story of Dinah, which I didn't bring you sources here, the overtures that were made to the city of Shechem were in the language of Brit. If you do the Brit Milah, if you do this covenant of circumcision, then we will be able to have peace with you. Then we can engage with you. We can become one. We can have a chibur, join with you. But this was a brit that you could say is was what's the word? Facetious, I guess. It was never meant to. It was done very slyly. It was never in the mindset of Shimon and Levi, at least the sons of Yaakov. It was never meant to strengthen the bonds with Shechem. It was meant to weaken Shechem so that Shimon and Levi would have an easier job slaughtering them. Yaakov might have thought differently. Yaakov might have thought, here's a real chance at connecting with the people of this land. But his sons did not think that. So Shechem becomes, with that event, a place of broken breeds, a place of where covenant has been perverted. And so this is a theme that continues in pretty much every iteration with which we meet Shechem. In that the next time that we're going to meet Shechem, right, after the family of Yaakov has gone down to Egypt, we're going to have to meet Shechem again only upon the re-entrance of the people of Israel into the land of Israel. And the place and Shechem is conquered. It's one of the 31 cities that Joshua conquers. But Shechem re-enters the storyline in the stories of Judges, and specifically the son of Gidon, Gidon's son Avimelech, who angles for the rule of Shechem. Shechem at this time is controlled most likely by the Ephraimites. I think that there's a strong argument to be made there, as opposed to Menashe. Gidon is from Menashe, but Avimelech's mother is from Shechem. And so he plays on his Ephraimite lineage to win over the citizens of Shechem, and says, you should anoint me as king. I'm your brother. And they do so. He gets anointed in the city of Shechem, in the temple of the Baal Brit. It's an interesting new star in the Canaanite pantheon of gods. And it was introduced upon the death of his father Gidon. Vahikasher made Gidon, who managed to hold Israel to a certain homeostasis when it came to worship of the divine. He was known as Yerubbaal, he who fought with the Baal. And for the most part, he was able to hold Israel as loyal to God. But after Gidon dies, Vayashuvu b'nei Yisrael, Vayiznu acharei ha'be'alim, they backslided, and they acted treacherously and whored after the Baal, the god of Canaan. Vayasimu lahem Baal Brit leElohim, and they made a god called Baal Brit, and Baal Brit's headquarters was in Shechem. This is where Avimelech gets the money from the coffers of the Baal Brit to start his kingdom. And he's very much a Baal Brit worshiper. And the whole story of Shechem in the book of Shoftim, in the book of Judges, involves this Baal Brit cult in Shechem. Now, Baal Brit is an interesting name for a god. And it's a god that it takes on an interesting form. Let's look at the description of the Baal Brit in Masechet Shabbat. by Rav Achdvoy bat Emai. Rav Achdvoy bar Emai, the son of Emai, said the following: Avodah zarah pchuta mikzayit mahu. In discussing the different sizes that idols can take on. Now, anyone who's been to the Israel Museum or any one of the numerous archaeological museums in Israel and outside of Israel that showcase the gods of this region, specifically Canaan, know that the images, the gods, the idols are of different sizes. Right? Sometimes you can have a huge standing matzeva. I use huge very loosely here, maybe something like this large. Usually the idols are this size. Sometimes they're very tiny. So what if you have an idol that's smaller than a kizayit, right? Which is a funny expression because we usually think of that as like a rabbinic term, right? Like the amount of food that one eats. Like, is it more than a kizayit, less than a kizayit? If it's what is such a thing? Right? What are we talking about here? We're talking about an idol that actually existed that's called the Baal Zvuv. Now, you might have heard of this idol before, right? Beelzebub, right? He entered into Christian mythology as another term for Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub. I'm sure that there are slight differences between all of them, but Baal Zvuv is the god of the Philistines in Ekron, and all kinds of ideas of why it's called, Lord of the Flies. Baal Zvuv literally translates as Lord of the Flies, maybe because I actually had the privilege to excavate in Ekron. Yes, there are flies there, but it's kind of in between the coast and the Shvela. But most likely it's because the icon itself was the size of a fly, right? Or maybe it was in the form of a fly. Maybe it looked like a fly. Okay. And this Baal Zvuv cult was adopted by Shechem, by Yasimu Lahem Baal Brit LeElohim. Ze Zvuv Baal Ekron. That somehow the Philistine cult of Ekron, which is on closer to the, let's say, the Gat and Ashdod area, definitely nowhere close to Shechem, somehow was adopted by the city of Shechem as their cult. And they took on the worship of this small icon or this small image of a fly. And so if that's the case, I don't really have anything to add here. The Baal Brit is another name for Baal Zvuv. But listen to why perhaps it's called Baal Brit. Why not just call it the Baal Zvuv? Why is it Vayasimu Lahem Baal Brit LeElohim? It's because there's a huge advantage to having an little icon, and that is that you could just put it in your pocket and you could take it around with you wherever you go. It's like a little keychain talisman, right? He made his little image of his God, whether it was an image of like of a fly, or whether it was an image like most of the images we see of humans, gods taking on human form. And he put it in his pocketbook. Whenever he would think of his God, he would hug it, he would kiss it. It was personal. It was immediate. It had the huge advantage of being accessible. It was my personal little pocket God, right? And it could be brought anywhere. And that is what would give it the name Baal Brit, because you had a relationship with it. So Shechem became this place of this kind of perverted brit, in that it was perverted because it was idolatry. Now, that's the Bavli. Now, if you want something crazy, let's look at the Yerushalmi. It's going to take it in a even further into the perversion of what's involved here. Tamar Reb Chuna bar Chama bar Gorion b'shem Rav, habal rosh gviya haya o ke'afun haya, v'yasimu lahem Baal Brit LeElohim. What this little pocket image was a circumcised phallus. Okay, so phallic worship is nothing new. It's been around forever, but it was the brit is that it was circumcised, right? What they did was they took the pagan symbol and they gave it a bris milah, and they made it Jewish. It's what's that? I wrote it down. It's like the perfect syncretic, syncretized cult. It's a symbol of holiness, the Brit Milah, uh, and but they put the symbol of holiness on an idol. It's like a place. Shechem seems to be a place that where you yearn for connection. Remember, Vatetze Dina lerot et benot Shechem. She wanted to connect to the girls of Shechem. Yaakov wanted to connect to Shechem, and Yosef wanted to connect to his brothers in Shechem, but it always seems to go wrong, right? In the case of Dinah, the rape and then the subsequent slaughter. In the case of Yosef, the sale of Yosef, saved by the skin of his teeth from being slaughtered himself. In the case of Avimelech's context, the Baal Brit, which is the Israelite community trying to be from, right? And I use that word very tongue in cheek, but through worship of idols. It is, if you will, not an exact parallel. Would be kind of like if like having a Christmas tree and putting a Jewish star on top, right? Like you're taking something that's a symbol of the other, and you're kind of giving it a Jewish spin, right? So you're taking an idol and you're giving it a Jewish spin through the Brit Milah. A more exact parallel is the Hermanubis, which was a syncretized, which was a cult in Egypt that synced the Greek Hermes with the Egyptian Anubis, and they created a new version about like this amalgam of Hermes and Anubis in this new form. And when archaeologists are looking at it, they're like, wait, is this Hermes? Is this Anubis? So that's really what the Baal Brit was. The Shechem is a city, and we're going to see this again and again. It's a city of Brit. It's a city where covenant is longed for, where covenant has the potential to thrive, but for whatever reason, always seems to go wrong. Right? The symbol, the she'ifa, the aspiration for holiness and connectedness is ruined. It is I'll bring. We only have time really for one more example, and we're going to continue this discussion of Shechem and specifically why Yosef HaTzadik has to own Shechem and be buried in Shechem, be interred in Shechem. The ground, as it were, had to absorb Yosef in order for Shechem to eventually achieve what it needs to achieve. We often speak about people needing to achieve what they need to achieve, but places as well have to achieve their potential. This is a one more example before we have to go of Shechem as a place of broken brit, right? If the Brit Milah in the days of Dinah was an example of broken brit, if the aspiration for fraternity in the days of Yosef and his brothers was an example of a broken covenant, if the Baal Brit in the days of Avimelech is an example of broken brit in Shechem, here's another wonderful historical example of broken brit. In the land of Shechem, in the earth of Shechem, is interred the bones of Yosef, as we learn from the end of Sefer Yeshua, but also the gods of Rachel. Remember that Rachel stole away her father's trafim; she stole away her father's gods, right? And in Shechem, after the whole debacle with Dinah and the wholesale slaughter of the city, the men of the city, then Yaakov takes these accoutrements, these idols from Rachel. They hand over all of the idols that they had brought with them from Padan Aram, from Lavan's house. And any potential accoutrements that could smack of worship of idolatry. We know always jewelry is like a gateway to idolatry. It's always on the way to how we form an idol or worship an idol. And Yaakov buries them under the elah, under the tree that was in Shechem. So Yaakov inters the idols into the land of Shechem, which is a very curious thing. You would think that maybe he would want to destroy these idols and smash them like his grandfather Abraham did. But it's almost as if saying, this is a land that is just ruinous. You have ruined me, achartamoti, he says to his sons, you have ruined me. And so this is just a land that I want to invest with damage and destruction. So I'll inter the idols here. Who will counter that will be Yosef's interment in Shechem. And not only Yosef's interment in Shechem, we will see that Yehoshua also buries his Sifrei Torah in Shechem. He sinks the covenant that he makes with Am Yisrael, Tachat Ha'ila Asher b'Shechem, in the same place that Yaakov buries his idols. There is much within the land itself that smacks of separatism, danger, and division, namely the idols, as well as connection, love, covenant, brit. That's Yosef and the Sifrei Torah. But I promised you one more connection to broken brit, and it hinges on these idols that are buried in Shechem. Remember the end of the book of Kings, second book of Kings. This is a time when Assyria has its grip on the land of Israel. They're going to exile the 10 northern tribes, and they're going to cause great damage to Malchut Yehuda. And part of the way that they act is Sancheirav ba'u bilbelat ha'olam. Sancheirav, Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, came and he did population transfers. So he took the population from the kingdom of Israel and transferred them to various different points in his kingdom, namely the 10 lost tribes, because we do not know where they ended up. And then he took other nations and brought them to the land that had once been inhabited by the 10 northern tribes. And these are peoples who collectively became known, or at least some of them became known as the Shomronim, the Samaritans, the Kutim, all different terms for this Gentile population that became absorbed into the area around the city of Shomron, which was the capital city of the north. Now, these people were just like those in Shechem who had a syncretized cult. They synced their gods that they had brought with them from outside of the land of Israel, that they brought their home gods, the gods of the lands that they had come from. They brought them with them, just like Rachel did from Padan Aram, and they also adopted the elements of the Torah. The text tells us that they consulted with the high priest in Jerusalem. How do we survive in this land? This is a new land with a new God. What do we need to do? And they were taught about certain elements, and they synced these two religions together. Yireim et Hashem, they worshipped HaKadosh Baruch Hu, vayasu lehem mikzotam kohanei bamot. And yet they worshipped in ways foreign to Jerusalem-centered worship. Et Hashem hayu yireim, again, they worshipped God, ve'et Elohehem hayu avdim, but they serviced and served their own gods. So this syncretized cult. Now, if you go through the Samaritan Bible, then you will see that the cultic center for the Samaritans is not Jerusalem, but rather Har Grizim. Shechem sits right in the valley between Har Grizim on the south and Har Eval on the north. Har Grizim is known as the Mount of Blessing, and Har Eval is known as the Mount of Curses. We're going to discuss this next week. And Shechem sits right in the middle. And every reference to a holy place in the Bible that we have, like Hamakom Shashem Yir'eh Etchem, right? The place that God will show you in the Samaritan Bible is identified as Har Grizim. So for the Samaritans, the Har Grizim, right by Shechem, is their holiest place. That's where their temple sits. And let's just look at how the Samaritans exemplify yet another yet another iteration of broken brit. Rabbi Yishmael ben Rabbi Yossi here is, I'm quoting to you from the Yerushalmi. I'm almost done. Rabbi Yishmael ben Rabbi Yossi went to well-known Neapolis. That's how it's written in the Yerushalmi, because by that time in the 4th century Israel Common Era, the city was known by its Greek name, Neapolis, the new city, right? But that's just the Roman name. It's Greek, but now adopted by the Romans for Shechem. The Samaritans came to him. He told them, I am seeing you bowing down, not to this mountain. You're not bowing down to Har Gerizim, but to the idols under it. As it is written, that there's something about the idolatry that was interred in Shechem that is attractive to the Kutim, attractive to the Samaritans. And here the Pnei Moshe, a commentary on Avodah Zarah, it expands and says, it is clear to me, Rabbi Yishmael is saying, that you are not worshiping the mountain, but what is interred at its base, namely the idols that Yaakov had buried in Shechem. So this is in the Samaritans are another example of Brit gone bad, of trying to connect to God or trying to connect to the other in this place, but failing at it. In their translation, it was through, it was through idolatry. In their how they experienced their connection was through idolatry. And Rabbi Yishmael here is craftily pointing out that idolatry sits at the very base of the mountain, that it's the very earth of Shechem, which just begs the question, why is Yosef buried there? And so I'm gonna leave you with that question, and that's where we're gonna pick up next week with the idea that, and I'll just leave you with this last midrash in Shmot Rabbah, which you can read here in the English or the Hebrew, which is that Yosef himself insists on being buried in Shechem. It's not that this was some kind of a top-down decision. Well, we want different pilgrimage sites, right? We want to give Tamar 2,000, 3,000 years down the road, lots of work. So, as a tour guide, so we're going to make sure that we have different pilgrimage sites so she can take people to Hebron and take people to Shechem, and, so there are different sites. No, Yosef says, Mishchem ganavtem oti chai. You stole me alive from Shechem. Hechziru et atzmotai l'Shechem. Return my bones to Shechem. I need to be buried in Shechem, which is outrageous, because who would want to revisit the scene of a crime for eternity? Who would want to, and this was a terrible, terrible trauma, not only for Yosef, obviously, but for all of Am Yisrael. Why would Yosef, for all eternity, want to be interred in the city where he was almost killed and where the entire exile was launched from? That's the question. And hopefully the answer that we'll get to next week will shed light on this Even b'Yisrael, as he is known, the stone of Israel, Yosef. Even, both the Av and the Ben, the father, the patriarch, who's both of the patriarchs and continues on into the tribal makeup of Am Yisrael. So if there are any questions, then I'll take questions now. Okay. Regarding Shechem, it is the place that launched the entire Yosef story. Is Yaakov's deeding the city to him a way of trying to make up for his own role in the whole story? I would say that it would be one thing if he just gave him the city of Shechem, but it's another thing entirely that Yosef is there for perpetuity. Like, I think that there must be more than just, well, let me try to make amends for the damage that I caused you. Like, it would, and also I'm still stuck on the scene of the crime. Like, why would he be so drawn to this place that was so damaging to him personally, and damaging to Am Yisrael? And by the way, I know many of you have to go, but and I'll start with this midrash next week. Shechem makom mizuman leporanut. Our sages have no, they don't quibble. There are no qualms when it comes to Shechem. They don't mince words. It's a place that is ripe for disaster. In Shechem inu et Dina. In Shechem they raped Dina. In Shechem machru et Yosef. In Shechem they sold Yosef. In Shechem the kingdom of Israel was torn asunder. That's the place where Rechavam and Yeravam broke the kingdom in half. The son of Shlomo, Rechavam, he went up to Shechem, and that's where he said, no go. We're not going to have a single kingdom anymore. You follow me down to Jerusalem. And that's what laid the groundwork for Yeravam to be so successful in seceding from Malchut Yehuda and creating Malchut Yisrael. It's a place of division. It's a place of almost irrepair. So,
and that's why excuse me, that's
yeah.
exactly why Yosef wants to be buried there.
Oh, so you're giving away the whole shir.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Tamar, I have.
No,
I
you're
have
right.
very,
You're right. Yeah, you're right. Yosef, you're right. He has to spend the rest of his eternity. He sowed a lot of division in Am Yisrael, but he who has b'makom, that expression, Yosef, it's a Breslover expression that I got to through Yosef Karduner, who's a musician. If you believe that you have the potential to ruin something, then believe that you're the only one who has the potential to fix it, right? If you can cause so much disaster, then you can also cause so much repair. So that's basically my share next week. But I have a lot more to say. But let me just get to the comments, and then I'm going to get to
Tamar,
yeah.
another thing, according to the Medrash, Asnat was the daughter of Dinah and Shem. Around they found it. So very possibly, that could have been a reason also
Beautiful.
why that he, was given and why he wanted to be buried there, because
Right.
it's part of.
Right, absolutely. But then it just sharpens the question of the pain and the trauma that was caused to Am Yisrael. Here's the fruits. That's maybe not the right word. The product. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. The product of the rape, right? And and look, she's producing Menashe and Ephraim, right? She's a matriarch within Israel. Nobody ever talks about Asnat, except there is a work of the pseudepigrapha called Joseph and Asenath, Yosef and Asnat, which does delve, more into her personality. But if you think about it, she is one of the matriarchs because she's the mother of Menashe and Ephraim, two of the tribes in Israel. And if we take that, which I'm loath to do, taking Midrash as historical fact, but if we see Asnat somehow within that sordid story of the rape of Dinah, then putting Yosef there is just like, what's the word, adding insult to injury, right? It's the wrong place for him. It's absolutely the right place for him, but it just seems to be such a wrong place for him. But that's a really good point, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. I have to add that.
Thank you so much. They're excellent shiurim. I love them. Really,
My pleasure.
thank you.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you.
I like your highlight in Shechem as the place where the brothers have flexed their muscles, so to speak, and triumphed as they would see it over another, especially in a situation that would put their father in a poor light with the neighbors. They're still chafing from the elevation of Yosef over themselves in Shechem, far from father, right? Ra'u et atzman. They can glory in remembering how they bested their father and prove themselves that he was wrong and they were right. It is a place, and we're going to see this also in the Shem Mishmuel next week, who makes this more explicit. It is a place where you stoke your own ego. It's a necessary place for Am Yisrael. Every person within Am Yisrael needs to realize his part. Shechem means a part. He needs to realize his part before he can collapse into breed, right? You need to, it's like before you get married, they suggest that common wisdom suggests that you know yourself, right, before you get married, because you're coming at this not as, two halves of a whole, but as a whole and a whole to make a bigger whole, right? Like a WHOLE, right? Not the HOLE. You're coming as a complete, so as a Shechem, as a piece, as your own piece. So yes, that's where you go to figure out who you are. Please post your email contact info. I'm posting it right now. Tamar Weissman at gmail.com. It's very easy. And isn't it so interesting that Shechem is one of the Quran is what? Yes, and it's definitely yes, it's an Ir Miklat. It is that's going to answer, I think, to the other side, to the positive sides of Shechem, which I hope to get into next week. I wonder why Yaakov sent Yosef to Shechem, given his feelings about the area. Um, I don't think it was that he sent Yosef to Shechem. He sent Yosef to the brothers, and the brothers were in Shechem. I think that the impetus to go to Shechem is the brothers. And by the way, and it really has to be understood. That's not a point that's made strongly enough. I made it already. I bludgeoned it over the head in the shiur. But it's so important. If there's one thing that I wish I could teach, it's the geography here is so striking. There's no way you go to Shechem to shepherd sheep. It's exhausting for them and it makes no sense. They were clearly heading to Shechem because they passed not bad blood. They had memories there. They had to be in Shechem specifically.
But Yaakov knew that they were in Shechem. It wasn't that he said, "I don't know where your brothers are. Can you go and find them for me?"
Right.
He said,
but yeah, he knew that they were in Shechem. But I think that the stronger question there is, how was he putting Yosef in such a dangerous place, right? Like a dangerous position that like it was going to the brothers in Shechem, right? It was yes, he knew, and yeah, everybody would have been aware that to make such a journey meant you were making a statement, right? It was not a casual day trip. So yes, it definitely strengthens the question about how Yaakov was willing to put his son into such a fraught and dangerous situation, because the psukim there are dripping with subtext. It's clear that Yaakov knows how his other sons feel about Yosef. And it's clear that he feels that Yosef potentially has the ability to bring shalom. And that's maybe why he's buried there. But it's still, you can always ask that question, and it's a very legitimate question. How does a father send his son into the lion's den like that?
But could Yaakov have thought that there was something good to come out of it, that they could? I mean, he
I think he must have
that bad.
I think he must have. I think otherwise it wasn't like he was sending him knowing that there was going to be disaster. I think you send, you send with the confidence that it doesn't make any sense. That he would have sent Yosef with certitude that Yosef would be damaged. It also doesn't make any sense that he sent Yosef blindly and innocently, benignly, gullibly, not understanding the context. Yaakov clearly understood the context. It was like weighing the risks and the benefits, and he said, "I'm willing to risk it," but I think he understood how risky it was. But this fraternity had to happen, and it did happen. It just happened hundreds, perhaps even thousands of years after Yaakov hoped it would happen. So, yeah. Even explains about the area. He told them to check their shalom. Might have been worried that they would behave inappropriately there again. Yes. Okay, everybody. If there aren't any other questions, then I bid you all a good night. And Bezrat Hashem will continue next week. Be well, everyone. Laila Tov.